Well, it was one of the defining policies of the Trump administration, a trade war with China that ended up damaging both sides. Now, for the first time since taking office, the Biden administration has laid out its own view of trade with China and carried over much of the same combativeness.
Something is shifting under our feet, and not in some vague, abstract way. It's happening right now, in the food markets of Accra, in the banks of Cairo, and along dusty roads where truckers wait for diesel they can barely afford. President Trump's harsh tariff policies didn't just ignite trade wars with China or Europe. They peeled back the cover on a financial system that has quietly favored the wealthy West for decades, while leaving the global South, especially Africa, dangling on a fragile lifeline. At first glance, it's easy to think tariffs are just taxes between giants. America, China, the EU slugging it out. But when Trump raised tariffs again in early 2025, it didn't just hurt Beijing or Berlin. The ripple hit Lagos, Nairobi, and Lusaka in ways most Americans will never see. Why? Because underneath all the trade talk lies the muscle of the US dollar, a currency that remains the backbone of global trade and the silent hand-setting prices on oil, wheat, machinery, even the medicine that stocks African hospitals. It's a dependency that's been building for decades. The numbers tell the story plainly. By late 2023, the US dollar still made up more than half of global currency reserves, 57.4% to be exact. Nearly 88% of all currency trades involved the dollar. This meant that even countries rich in resources like oil, gold, cobalt, and cocoa were still forced to price almost everything in dollars. When the dollar's value rises or the Federal Reserve hikes interest rates, as it did repeatedly through 2023 and 2024, African economies pay a brutal price. Take Nigeria. In 2023, under immense pressure, it burned through billions trying to prop up the naira. It failed. The currency tanked by over 40%. Ghana's cedi plummeted nearly 30% in the same year, tipping the country into a spiraling debt crisis that left public workers unpaid for weeks. Egypt's pound kept falling too, driving inflation beyond 30%, a disaster for families already scraping by. Over in Kenya, debt repayments ate up almost 60% of all tax revenues by 2023. Every time the dollar strengthened, the shilling weakened, and Kenya's already tight budget groaned under the extra strain. The dependency runs so deep that even trade between two neighboring African countries often gets settled in US dollars. Imagine that. Two nations that share borders, cultures, and local produce still need to convert to a foreign currency to trade fish, maize, or electricity. This is why Trump's aggressive global economic stance feels like a punch in the gut for many African economies. When he boasts in speeches that he'll slap 100% tariffs on nations challenging the dollar's dominance, targeting BRICS countries and beyond, it's not just faraway politics. It's a direct threat to millions of lives across Africa who pay more for bread, fuel, and vital medicines every time Washington decides to tighten its grip. So why does Africa feel the dollar's squeeze more painfully than, say, Mexico or Thailand? It boils down to three intertwined realities. Most African economies are still relatively small and heavily reliant on global prices for survival. They export raw materials, cocoa from Ghana, oil from Angola, copper from Zambia, and then import everything from tractors to tuberculosis drugs. Because they're price takers, they have little power to set terms. Global commodity prices, nearly always tied to the dollar, dictate their fate. Intra-African trade remains shockingly low. Instead of trading among themselves, many countries still buy wheat from Russia or machinery from Germany, rather than sourcing regionally. So when the dollar moves, it doesn't matter if it's for a shipment from India or Italy. The local economies flinch. Most African currencies can't be directly swapped. Even if Kenya wants to buy cotton from Burkina Faso, they often have to change shillings to dollars, then dollars to CFA francs. This middle step hands power and profit to the dollar. It's a fragile, lopsided system. And it's why the African street vendor in Dar es Salaam or the mother in Abidjan paying double for baby formula might not know the details of America's tariff wars, but they feel every shockwave. And so, a quiet question has begun echoing louder across Africa. Why not build something of our own? Why keep dancing to Washington's tune? That's the question we'll tackle in Part 2, where we explore how Africa is fighting back, with bold new payment systems, currency swap deals, and a surprising cast of global partners eager to loosen the dollar's grip. As much as the weight of the dollar feels like a permanent chain, Africa is not just sitting back. Across the continent, a wave of bold experiments is underway. steps that only a few years ago might have seemed too risky or outright impossible. It all starts with a simple idea: trade more with each other and rely less on the dollar. That idea is taking shape through something called the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, or PAPSS for short. Launched by the African Export-Import Bank in partnership with the African Union and the African Continental Free Trade Area, PAPSS was born in 2022 to solve a stubborn problem. With over 40 currencies across Africa, even simple trade between neighbors often demanded converting money multiple times, each transaction handing profits to foreign banks and strengthening the dollar's grip. PAPSS is trying to flip the script. It allows countries to pay each other directly in local currencies, settling accounts through a shared African platform. That means if a shop in Ghana wants to buy machinery from Kenya, they can do it without first buying dollars in New York. It cuts costs, speeds up transactions, and, most importantly, keeps more money circulating inside Africa. Officials at the African Union believe that if fully embraced, PAPS could slash intra-African transaction costs by over $5 billion annually. That's money that can be reinvested in local roads, hospitals, and schools instead of vanishing into foreign exchange fees. But there's a catch. For this new system to truly work, Africa has to trade more with itself. Right now, intra-African trade makes up only about 17% of the continent's total trade, compared to over 60% in Europe. That means African factories need to start producing more of what other African countries want to buy. It's a long road that requires everything from better infrastructure to fewer bureaucratic hurdles at borders. Even so, some nations aren't waiting. Nigeria, for example, has been a front-runner in rethinking currency dependence. Back in 2018, it signed a currency swap agreement with China, allowing businesses to trade directly in naira and yuan without first buying dollars. By 2024, as dollar volatility surged, Nigeria renewed that deal for another 3 years, signaling this new approach wasn't just a temporary patch, but a lasting strategy. Zambia took things even further. In 2023, it announced it would conduct all trade with China in yuan, a move that sent a clear message. We'd rather pay a known partner directly than keep bending to the unpredictable dollar. These changes may sound technical, but for ordinary people, they can be the difference between a stable currency and skyrocketing bread prices. When countries avoid constantly buying dollars, they protect their local currencies from violent swings. That means fewer price shocks at the market stalls and a little more predictability for families planning how to pay school fees or medical bills. And it's not just China stepping in. The UAE is playing its part too. In late 2023, Egypt signed a $1.36 billion currency swap with Abu Dhabi, aiming to steady the Egyptian pound and keep critical imports flowing. Ethiopia quickly followed suit with its own deal in 2024, looking to shield itself from the dollar's punishing mood swings. In the bigger picture, these swaps are baby steps, but they're multiplying. Each one weakens the dollar's monopoly a little more. Then there's BRICS, the economic bloc originally made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Once dismissed as a mere talking shop, BRICS is now reshaping global finance by welcoming more African nations into its orbit. Countries like Egypt and Ethiopia have already secured a seat at the table, eager to benefit from the bloc's push to trade outside Western-controlled systems. BRICS is also championing the idea of using local currencies for trade, freeing members from the costly ritual of buying dollars first. It's an idea that gained explosive momentum after the Russia-Ukraine war. When the US and Europe slammed Moscow with sanctions, freezing its dollar assets and locking it out of the SWIFT banking network, Russia responded by accelerating efforts to build its own payment systems and trade directly with partners like China, without a single dollar involved. According to Russia's central bank, by early 2025, more than 20 countries were already using its alternative payment channels. At the same time, Russia and China signed a blockbuster deal worth $260 billion, settling 95% in yuan and the rest in rubles. No dollars needed. This massive experiment is shaking the foundations of a dollar-centric system that's ruled for nearly a century. All of these moves haven't gone unnoticed in Washington. President Trump, standing before a roaring crowd in early 2025, made it clear he hates when countries abandon the dollar. He called it like losing a revolutionary war. a direct threat to America's global standing. His words weren't just dramatic, they were an unusually blunt admission of how much the U.S. relies on the dollar's global supremacy to project power. Meanwhile, Trump's team raced to put out fires. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew to Beijing, desperate to convince China to ease off its support for Russia and slow the dollar alternatives. In Europe, even old allies like French President Macron began to warn of the dangers of being too tied to Washington's financial rules. Through all this, Africa has emerged as a crucial battleground. With its vast young population and unmatched natural resources, it holds the potential to make or break this global push for de-dollarization. If Africa continues down this path, embracing systems like PAPS, expanding local manufacturing, deepening currency swaps, it could finally tip the scales. In Part 3, we'll look even deeper into the road ahead, the obstacles, the risks, and why true financial independence means more than just ditching the dollar. It means rewriting Africa's entire economic story on Africa's own terms. If the last few years have proven anything, it's that the world's economic map isn't carved in stone. Even the mighty dollar, long thought untouchable, is facing cracks in its once iron grip. From Russia's sanctions to China's quiet maneuvering, from BRICS forging new paths to African nations striking their own currency deals, the old rules are being tested in ways we've never seen. But here's the truth. Most headlines skip. Breaking free from dollar dependence is about much more than trade settlements or new banking software. It's about rewriting the very DNA of Africa's economies, building something sturdier, more self-reliant, and better tailored to the continent's own future. For now, the dollar still stands tall. According to recent figures, nearly 45% of Africa's cross-border payments still travel through the SWIFT system, where the dollar is king. Many African central banks keep hefty reserves in dollars, using them as a financial safety net. And for ordinary people, the prices of gas, imported medicine, spare parts, even wheat bread all still track the dollar's ups and downs. That's the reality facing leaders who dream of change. Because dismantling dollar dominance doesn't just mean signing a deal with China or testing out PAPS, it means overhauling local industries so Africa produces more of what it consumes. It means regional governments working together to smooth out customs bottlenecks so a shipment of tomatoes can cross 5 borders without rotting on a truck. It means banks modernizing so businesses can trust payments will clear reliably in local currencies. And it means stabilizing fragile currencies through disciplined monetary policy. Hard, often unpopular work. None of this happens overnight. The continent's history with currency volatility and inflation runs deep, leaving scars that make people instinctively cling to the dollar for safety. Convincing families in Lusaka or Dakar to keep their savings in local notes instead of dollars or euros will take years of building trust. Trust that their money won't lose half its value by next month. But despite the steep climb, there are green shoots pushing through the cracks. Take Kenya, for example. In 2023, it struck a landmark deal letting 3 global oil giants accept the Kenyan shilling directly for crude imports. The move saved the country nearly 67 billion shillings each month, money that stayed home instead of vanishing into foreign banks. Or look at the East African community, which is steadily advancing plans for a single common currency, the East African shilling, to smooth trade from Tanzania to Rwanda. These are not just economic shifts. They are deeply political and cultural, cutting to the heart of what sovereignty means in the 21st century. For decades, the dollar's power wasn't just financial. It was a lever the US used to press other nations into line. The moment a country stepped out of Washington's favor, sanctions were just a signature away. From Iran to Venezuela to Zimbabwe, it became clear that the global reserve currency could double as a global weapon. It's this realization that has driven the BRICS alliance, with Russia and China at the forefront, to openly push for a world where no single currency holds all the cards. And Africa, with its vast resources and growing middle class, is the key player everyone wants on their team. But here's the twist. True economic freedom for Africa won't come from simply swapping dollars for yuan or shifting reserves into rubles or gold. That only changes who holds the whip. Real freedom is about building up local manufacturing, so Congo processes more of its own cobalt and Ghana refines its own cocoa. It's about trading Nigerian-made tractors for Ethiopian wheat, cutting deals in local or regional currencies so value stays within African borders. It's also about weaning off dependency on old financial lifelines like the IMF or World Bank loans. which often come tied with strings that shape everything from energy policy to how much farmers pay for fertilizer. Yes, the global momentum is there. China and Russia are backing Africa's pivot. BRICS is opening doors. Even longtime U.S. allies in Europe are reconsidering their dependence on Washington's economic shadow. But in the end, the heavy lifting has to happen in Africa itself. Leaders will need to crack down on corruption that drains billions from public coffers, strengthen legal systems so businesses trust contracts, and invest in the skills and technologies that drive modern economies. All of this is harder than simply moving decimal points on a balance sheet. Still, every time a payment clears on PAPS, every time a shipment of goods crosses 3 countries without being priced in dollars, every time a local entrepreneur finds they can trade in their own currency, that's a small crack in the old walls. And maybe that's how empires fall. Not with a single grand collapse, but through countless tiny fractures, as people quietly build something new. So where does that leave us? Watching closely. Because Africa's journey to shed dollar chains isn't just about economics. It's about dignity, autonomy, and rewriting decades of dependency. If this bold new course holds, it could reshape not only Africa's future, but the entire global balance of power. What do you think? Can Africa truly break free from the dollar's long shadow? Will the new systems, currency swaps, and homegrown production finally give the continent the control it's been denied for so long? Or will old patterns prove too hard to shake? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive valuable, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to understand how our world is changing right before our eyes.